Who is the richest person you know? Haven't talked to him in a while. That had a friend I'd go to card game tourneys and stuff with. He lives a mostly poor frugal life. He and his wife both had pretty mundane jobs. One time I asked if he could come on a trip, and his reply was that he'd have to ask his trust committee to release some money for it. Like, WTF trust. And he told me his grandfather was an early executive for Walmart, owned a ton of property in the area, and ended up leaving everyone in his family huge trusts and a lot of property. He just tries not to touch as much so he'll have it to retire. Dear Fit family, there are a few weirdly rich people who started agricultural companies around where I grew up. My dad is a pretty big farmer in the area, so we know a lot of them. I know, if you mean could get a hold of relatively easily, it's the R-Fit family who started Ardeo. I think some of them are worth around $500 million. However, if by know you mean have a pretty good relationship with its father-in-law who is worth around $3,040 million. I have vague connections to L&N Fleet Supply, Simplot and some Silicon Valley venture capitalists as well. That runs it is what I believe to be rich. He is currently selling his house, which is up the road from mine, or I should say one of his many houses. Anyway, he owns an absolute shit ton of supercars. Has shit I've never heard of, and some things I can't even identify even after hours of searching the web. He owns a military insurance company, or something like that, but he is the richest I've ever met. I am slightly related to a millionaire through marriage. Technically too. NT Assets has technically a millionaire since the property we live in is nearly $1 million on its own, not counting his others. Know a few trust fund kids at work, although they left the job some time ago. Family money with family businesses. Richest would be bloke who made his wealth with South American gold mines, and the others are inheritance kids of another mining family here, who are only worth like a few tens of millions each. Though I vaguely remember 100 meters something to do with that whole ordeal. IDK. I know a few owners, founders of tech companies, some more personally than others. A childhood friend of my dad's that I worked with. He lived very frugally and owned hundreds of pieces of property in and by Temecula, California. A few actors, actresses that were successful. Not to Brad Pitt's level, but very successful. My son's friend recently moved into a mansion. Before that I would do school carpool and pick the friend up in the morning. They had several very expensive cars, some brands I never heard of. They had a nanny, cleaning lady and personal chef at their house just about every day. A guy who owns an orchard of apple trees and blueberries. He's also a member of the Conservative Party of Canada. Loves to flaunt his money. I've heard how he has $1 million in most banks in town and makes $30,000 a day on berries. My grandpa can't stand a guy. The guy I went to college with who often mentioned his family had a box at MSG. Having a box isn't necessarily a rich thing. Mentioning having a box with the same attitude as mentioning you're grabbing pizza is IMO. This kid who is a trust fund baby. I worked at a horse farm and the mother died. Father isn't in the picture. He gets a $200K a year allowance from the trust, and in a few years he will get access to the entire estate. This kid who is a trust fund baby. I worked at a horse farm and the mother died. Father isn't in the picture. He gets a $200K a year allowance from the trust, and in a few years he will get access to the entire estate. I met a hermit who knew how to fix anything, grow everything, and lived in a small wooden shack on a hillside overlooking the ocean. His spirit was rich happiness and wealthier than any soul I've ever met. Personal friend who does home renovations for the obscenely wealthy. He lives in a tiny cabin in the middle of nowhere and never talks about money. He bought 3 planes last year. He passed away a couple of years ago. But I knew a guy who was the founder and owner of a gym company, who had franchises all over the country. His house was huge. I have to get out into the acquaintance zone to find someone with more money than me. Those people have hundreds of millions. One of my co-workers is the granddaughter of a billionaire. I have like $12. but she uses my coffee creamer sometimes. I have a bunch of friends who are professional athletes making $6 million, $9,500,000 annually. So, probably them. Anyone that views being rich this way. I have an uncle who produces automobile chassis for Ford here in Southeast Asia.